Hey,
Great.
great.
Marge and Susan, I don't know if I covered this point with you. Are you folks comfortable having the talk recorded and posted on the YouTube channel? Seeing nods. Yes, great.
Yes.
Thank you. So Marge and Susan are joining us to talk about immigration issues, in particular an immigrant welcoming policy that they've been working on to develop a draft, and just other things that are going on in that sphere. We Marge and Susan, we typically begin with really short introductions of our members, just so you have a sense of who's in the room. So you may know most of us anyway, but let's do that real quick, and then we can go on. So Sarah, you want to start?
Hi, I'm Sarah Hanna. What to say about myself? I'm mainly interested in environmental issues, but interested in all things Natick, and yeah, let people go on. Can't think today. Sorry.
And Sarah and I are both members of First Congregational in downtown Natick, which, as Marge and I think Susan knows, have some pretty strong feelings about the need to support our migrant populations. Tom, why don't I go to you next?
Hi, Tom Palmer, a 5-year resident of Natick.
Thank you. In the room there, let's see, I'm seeing Pat Conaway first.
Morning, Pat Conaway, 53-year president of Natick, I guess. By way of San Diego County. Keep being a beautiful guy.
Thanks, Pat. And Martin?
Martin Kessel. I think I beat Pat. I think I'm 66 years altogether, although I wasn't here for that entire time.
Is there anybody else in the room there with you, Martin? Or
Pat and I are it. Yeah.
at the moment, anyway. Okay.
And you can see us both on camera, so I guess
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Bill.
Hi, Marge. You know me. I just left a minute ago to see a part of my fence in the back collapsed in the last 10 minutes. Tree smashed down on it. So wonderful thought. Marge, you know me. I'm the newest member of the Community Preservation Act. So we can get some housing money. I don't know.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Tom Daly, you're just got to come off. You got to come off mute there, Tom. Yeah, your mute button. Where did he go?
He disappeared. I wonder.
All right, we'll come back to Tom.
Hopefully, Tom will reappear.
Let's see. Kathleen.
Hi, I'm a member of the Library Board of Trustees, and this area is near and dear to my heart as a library person. The Morse Institute is collecting materials in a lot of different languages now, really aware of our diversifying community. And we also, for years, have offered English language courses and conversational groups to support those in our community who do not have English as their first language and are interested in learning more.
Thanks, Kathleen. Brian?
Good morning. Brian McPherson. I live abutting Lake Cochituate, so environmentalist, progressive, trying to have some positive impact on the community. Thanks for coming, and looking forward to what you got to say.
Thanks, Brian. Cindy. Cindy, you got to come off mute. There you go.
Morning, 4-year resident of Natick, trail steward, and quite interested in what you have to say today about immigration. And because it's usually you're reading about the border, but I'm not that aware of immigration locally. So thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Another first churcher, Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Gentry. Marge, you know me. For everyone else, I've been here for a little over 20 years and just want to be more informed about all the things that are going on in Natick, immigration, environmental, everything. So.
Thanks, Chris. Sally.
Good morning. I'm really looking forward. I'm Pat Conaway's sister, and I'm very active in Keep Natick Beautiful, but I'm also very much a fan of this group. And I think your topics today, the two of you sharing that with us, couldn't be more timely and helpful. So glad you're with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. And Tom Daly, I see you're off mute now, so.
Yeah. Hi, John. Thanks very much for how you doing. Yeah, I'm 30-year resident in Natick, company member, and interested in supporting any kind of immigration effort in Natick.
Thanks, Tom. Brinley?
Good morning. Known Marge for a long time. We used to be neighbors. And hi, Susan. I'm grateful you guys are here. 23-year resident of Natick, town meeting member. I've been on other committees as well. And this is very near and dear to my heart. I'm grateful that the two of you are doing this and glad you're here today and looking forward to what you have to say. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Brinley. Moving my cat out of the way. Beverly.
I'm not sure if Beverly is on at home or whether that's just her computer that I'm using here. I think it's because I'm using.
Okay. All right, that's fine. Catherine.
Catherine Coughlin, 22-year resident, and just hanging out in the background to hear you speak. Welcome.
Thanks, Catherine. I think that's all of us. So turn it over to. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss someone?
Did I introduce myself? Elaine
Oh no, I apologize, Elaine. Oh, I did miss you. Yeah, go right ahead.
I've been in Natick for about 7 or 8 years, but my mother and her family, my grandmother, escaped Russia around 1917 on the Trans-Siberian Railroad, ended up in Harbin and then in Newport. And I grew up in Fall River, graduated from Brandeis, and here I am.
We are happy for it. Thanks, Elaine.
Doug, I actually am listening.
You are here.
It's Beverly. I was just having trouble with I'm on my phone, which is why I'm not showing video, and I'm only able to listen, and I have to get off at 10, but I'm very interested in this topic. I used to do volunteer immigration law years ago, and our temple has been very active in trying to resettle refugees. And I'd like to be more involved in that, and I want to hear what's happening in Natick and really appreciate the efforts here.
Great, thanks, Bev. Okay. Anybody else I missed? No, great. Then I'll turn it over to Susan and Marge.
So I'm going to go first and then Susan will chime in. But Susan, you want to introduce yourself before I start?
Sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, it's such a pleasure to meet everyone here today and many others with coffee and sometimes without over the course of the years. I have been a Natick resident since 2008. I have 4 children, all 4 of whom have gone through the Natick public school systems, 3 of whom are now well beyond college. I'm the daughter of a naturalized citizen who is also a resident of Natick. I was born a few months after Dad naturalized here in the US. I grew up speaking English as a second language. I'm a graduate of Cornell University with a specialization in international legal affairs, and I have a master's in international law from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, where I focused on conflict resolution. But part of the passion for what I do comes not only as an advocate because of my family beginnings, but also because of my upbringing in the city of Brooklyn, New York, in the 1970s, and all that I experienced growing up living among refugees from all over the world. So I'm grateful to bring that forward and to never forget what I learned as a child and continue to bring those lessons forward to my children and hopefully future generations. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Susan.
And I'm Marge Roberson. I am a retired Natick High School teacher. I retired in 2017 after 20 years in the Natick school systems. And I'm also a member of FCC with Doug and Sarah and Bill and who else was on? Oh,
Chris.
Chris, yeah. I've been working for about 5 years with the Worker Center in Framingham, which its primary purpose is to assist immigrants who have been denied wages unfairly. But over the last 3 years, I've been working I think it's actually been 3 years, I've been working with this group to try to establish an immigrant welcoming policy in Natick. And with all of the immigrants that are arriving now, it becomes even more crucial that our neighbors know that they're welcome here regardless of who they are and what their status is. So if it's all right with you all, I'm going to show you a short presentation of why we're doing this and what we're doing. And then Susan will talk a little bit about immigration law. Immigration is such a huge topic right now. It's even huger. What's your huger? Isn't that a great word for a teacher?
High school teacher, huh?
High school teacher, yes. Not even there's the whole situation that's going on the border, which honestly, I don't think any of us can really understand unless we go there or know someone who's there. And then the immigrants that are arriving in Massachusetts, I have worked with people who have been helping them with food and housing. And that's another whole huge piece. Chief Hicks has gotten a group together in Natick to see if there's places in Natick where we can house people. And so that's something we're working on. But so far, the Presbyterian Church is the only place that's actually housing people, and then some individual volunteers. So immigration is a huge topic, but we as a community in Natick, or at least our group, would like very much for immigrants to feel like they're welcome here. And at our first meeting of this group that is trying to figure out if we can help people in Natick, the town administrator's first words out of his mouth was, "We want Natick to be a welcoming community." And I was like, yes, that's exactly what the beginning of our policy states. So I was very excited to hear him say that. So Doug has a PowerPoint. Do you want to do it, Doug, or do you want to let me share my screen? Whichever works for you.
If you're comfortable sharing your screen, that's fine. I think we've got that turned on. Yeah.
All right, let me get it open here. I had it open 2 seconds ago. There it is. Sorry, I actually don't have. I use Google Slides more than PowerPoint, but.
No. Do you want me to do it?
No. I got it. It's right here. I know how to use it. I just usually don't. And then I now have to move this up enough to share my screen. And I really was looking forward to coming to meeting you all, but it looks like you all were smart and stayed home, or most of you anyway. And I'm actually recovering from COVID, so you wouldn't have wanted to see me anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so can you all see this?
Yeah. And just while you're bringing that up, I see Paul Carew has also joined us. I think
okay, you want to introduce
Paul? So,
does he want to introduce himself, or are we?
Paul, do you want to say hi? Just we've got Susan Kang and Marge Roberson with us.
Good morning, ladies. Paul Carew, I'm the Veteran Services Director in the town of Natick. I'm a Marine Corps Vietnam veteran, and I'm welcome to hear what you have to say this morning. Natick has always been a welcoming community, and I don't think we should stop.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, so first of all, the coalition was formed. It's a number of Natick residents. Susan and I are 2. Right now, there are 5 of us industriously working on the actual policy. And then there are a number of other people who have helped along the way. We want to become a more welcoming community for people of all immigration statuses. And right now, we don't have a formal policy that codifies our commitment to being a welcoming community. And as a teacher, everything I did had to be written down. Every year I had to do the same PowerPoints to make sure that I understood all the Natick policies. And so we feel it's important to write this down in where people know it exists. And we've looked at a number of other policies. And a lot of what we have was drawn from the Maynard policy. And what we're working on right now is a select board policy that would then cover all the employees that are covered by the select board. So the policy, I'm moving this so I can get it, I can move this gallery, I suppose. It ensures that everyone is treated equally by all Natick town officials, regardless of their immigration status. So that means folks that people talk about being undocumented. It doesn't inhibit normal law enforcement operations, which is something that scares a lot of people. It doesn't prevent people from being arrested, charged, or convicted of a crime, regardless of their immigration status. What it does do is prevent that immigration status from becoming another level at which that person can be prosecuted or expelled or whatever. And we're calling it a welcoming policy because the word sanctuary policy is very, very loaded. And we wanted to be consistent with other policies that are in Massachusetts. I presented to the select board, and one of their concerns was, does it have to be called a sanctuary policy? And I went back and looked at a couple other towns, and they suggested that it not be called sanctuary, that it become an immigrant welcoming policy. And we want people to know that we're not offering sanctuary for immigrants. We just want them to be welcome, and we don't want our officials enforcing federal law. In Massachusetts prohibits police from detaining suspects in jail if ICE requests it, because basically then you're doing what the federal government is supposed to be doing. But it does allow them to ask about immigration status, share information with ICE, and let ICE into jails or other facilities and assist with immigration raids. That's allowed in Massachusetts. These are other towns that have policies. This isn't by no means all of them, and they vary. Some of them are town policies, which is what we're working on right now. Some of them are police policies, and some have both. The key features: prohibits any town employee from asking for information about a person's immigration status. This is also already true in the school systems. They can't ask a student their immigration status. It prohibits a town employee from participating in immigration law, except when required always by state or federal law. So if ICE says, oh, we want to raid this house or we want to raid this facility, it prevents our police department or any town employees from helping them and being a part of the raid. It also prohibits them from sharing information. So if someone's arrested and they find out that that person is an immigrant, we're asking people to not share that with ICE unless they're required to by state or federal law. So the key feature, to keep going, is it prohibits a town from allowing ICE into any Natick town facility unless ICE demonstrates a criminal warrant signed by a judge and or the chief of police, in currently his expert judgment, determines that a compelling law enforcement justification exists to allow ICE agents to access the facility or property. Just so you know, I'll say this now so you can get this question out of your head. We've talked to Chief Hicks 3 times. The last time was last week, and we've worked with him and Assistant Chief Lozon to write this policy so that they're comfortable with it. He was concerned about if they're having a large you know, the FBI or a whole bunch of law enforcement agencies not being able to allow ICE to be a part of whatever's going on. And so we wrote this section for him so that he would feel that he had the right to say, you know, we need ICE to be a part of this. Right now, Natick basically practices these policies, but we would like to codify it. First of all, to let undocumented folks mean that we're with them. Oftentimes, undocumented immigrants will not report crimes or talk to police or town officials because of their fear of being deported. And this allows them to feel like that's not going to happen. So if you report something happening, you're not going to be asked what your immigration status is. It encourages, oh, I already said that. And it ensures practices continue into the future, regardless of changes in personnel or leadership. Chief Hicks has been absolutely wonderful and really supports a lot of what we're doing, but that could change with a new leader. And so we would like this written down. So it's a part of our town policy, same school department, whatever department it happens to be a part of, we want it to be written down in case leadership changes and someone moves in who doesn't really promote this or may not know what to do. Is this really a Natick issue? So this is just one small piece when it comes to making Natick a welcoming community. There are people who live and work in Natick right now who are undocumented. And as Susan says, those people right next to you might be undocumented and you just don't know it. And we don't want to debate federal immigration policy. That even Congress can't debate federal immigration policy. That's not our purpose here. Our purpose is to make sure that the people who come to this town feel like they're welcome here, regardless of where they came from and who they are. And so we want our policies to reflect that. Towns do this differently. Some people go to town, some towns go to town meeting. We tried to look at towns that had the same governmental structure that we have in Natick. So we decided to go to the select board. We've been to them twice already. And it concerns town employees, so it's within the select board's purview. It's more easily modified if the need arises. And then town meeting doesn't get derailed with a huge discussion about the national political issue, which is part of the problem when talking about immigration. It's just so huge that no matter what you do, it's going to, people are going to start talking about the national issue. And it's consistent with the select board's equity goals for the town. It's also still possible we could do a bylaw if we felt that was necessary, but right now, we would like to go to the select board in late January with this policy and have them approve it. If you're interested in helping, you could write a letter to the select board. You could talk to the people in your faith community or other group of which you're a part, and maybe together you would write a letter supporting it. If you have friends who want to know more about this, some of us in the committee would happily come and talk to them. Hopefully right now, maybe in person, but possibly via Zoom. And we do have an email list, which I can have Doug send out that link, and talk to your friends and neighbors about why this is important, and then ask questions. The next slide says, let us hear your questions. But I was gonna let Susan talk first, and then you can ask questions. Doug, how long do we have? Is it 10 or?
We often run till about 10:30. Clearly,
Okay,
either
perfect.
if you have to leave, that's fine, but.
No, that's
yeah.
okay. I just wanted to know before Susan started
Yeah.
to talk, how much longer we had, and I want to leave plenty of time for questions and comments.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's me. I did send Doug a copy of our current policy. If you want, we can look at that after Susan's done, or you can ask questions and we can address that based on our policy. That's up to you, but right now I'm gonna let
Yeah, and if
Susan.
you just want to stop sharing your screen at this
I'm
point.
trying.
I don't know. Probably as a
I
host.
just
too.
lost
Something at the
Zoom.
very top that says stop share.
I know. You would think
Probably
I
in green.
have new share on the top. And I'm not even in Zoom anymore, which
That's
makes
the way to
me
do it. We can
really
sort
nervous.
of trump your share. I can try to what happens.
New share. I don't want a new, stop, there it is. I got it. Yay, yay me. Oh, there you are.
There you go. You've accomplished it.
Technological wizard. Don't tell anybody I used to teach technology at the high
Yeah,
school.
I was going to mention that.
Really depressing.
It changes so quick. Thanks very much, Marge. I know I've jotted down a few questions, but let's hear
Okay.
Susan, and then we'll open it up. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Doug and Sarah, for having me once again, and also for Marge, who we have been working together as a team, as Marge says, with a group of concerned citizens. But also, I have to say, I have a special place in my heart for Marge because she does a tremendous amount of work in the coalition. She spearheaded the drafting of the policy and was not afraid to like roll up her sleeves and take the comments from Chief Hicks and from other stakeholders, and to work together, she and I, over sessions to make the modifications that reflect the different ideas and contributions that were made by a variety of folks that we met with in the community. So I really enjoyed working with Marge on that project, and continue as we continue moving forward. As I mentioned briefly, the orientation in which I come at this, of course, is as a citizen of Natick. But prior to that, you don't really have a choice in how you're born or where you're born, and that lesson really came home to me as both of my parents immigrated to the United States in the 60s. My mom was actually born a US citizen, but moved back to Italy for a number of years. And both of them had really big challenges adjusting to the United States because of their perceived or real immigration status. And that was coupled by my experience meeting the Jewish diaspora in Brooklyn, many of whom had traveled out of the Iron Curtain through Italy, and then through Israel, and then finally to the United States. And so some actually spoke a little bit of Italian, and I was able to learn a little bit of Russian, a little bit of Yiddish, and reaffirm some of my Italian as well. But throughout my time there, I also came to learn about the plight of people from all over the world. Iran comes to mind, as well as Jamaica, a few other countries that just listening to everyone's stories. By far and away, some of the most impactful were stories of survival of the Holocaust and continuing suffering of survivors. And as a child, I had the opportunity to sort of eavesdrop while not being noticed, if that at all sounds familiar to anyone. And I was truly, truly, truly impacted by that. And I think it has never really left me. And that went through my orientation in law school, and I focused on international human rights for a significant part of my career, especially after paying off my law school loans. But there's always been that thread and that desire for justice. Living here in Natick brings together many of those pieces. I have been really struck by the impact that our community has in terms of the message and the tone that we set. And I met Doug and Sarah, particularly in connection with the 60th anniversary of MLK, although I had been to a few coffee with a purposes prior to that. But we sat on the lawn in person and discussed a whole range of topics. And ultimately, we thought, why not set up a time to talk about this topic? To me, building Martin Luther King's beloved community comes hand in hand with our commitment under the 1951 Refugee Convention, of which I was so deeply reminded when I saw and lived with folks who had family members who were returned back to Europe only to face a certain genocide. And it was absolutely an unforgettable and life-changing experience to meet people who had experienced that. Bringing forward that concept of a beloved community means that we are all must act in some way in a positive fashion. And that includes putting to words, to writing, and codifying and committing to what we believe our values are as a community. And so that's why I so firmly believe that having a policy in writing reminds the future generations, because I can only tell my children so much. And there is a tremendous amount on social media that is so easily accessible and that is incorrect and misleading, and in times downright a violation of human rights for those whose memories we should not forget. And I look behind me to see that I arrived by birth, but this was not a given. And our laws here in the United States, even after a bloody civil war, we did not have birthright citizenship until that matter was truly settled by the Supreme Court over almost more than a century ago. And so I'm mindful of the fact that how easily we can divert into a path of forgetting our history, and that looking behind me, I see those who are coming after me. And they're not coming through Ellis Island etched in stone like some of my ancestors. And they're coming under even more humble conditions. And so I've committed part of my career to immigration law in order to, in a way, as I come to the end of my career after 25 odd years in practice, to turn my eyes toward this ultimate statement. My father lives in Natick and lived in a town that had been occupied by Nazis and had food taken, stolen, family members shot in the fields, just terrible things. The hunger and the fear that persist for those who survive these circumstances. Today, our immigration law permits only 10% of those people who request asylum to actually accomplish that. And it requires very skilled advocacy to make it work. So mindful of those, I'm also mindful of the fact that our language around immigration has tended toward breaking of laws or illegality or undocumented, a lacking, a glass half empty, something that is wrong. Even sometimes human beings being called illegals. And this kind of language is incredibly dangerous. To dehumanize a person and to take a temporary status that they have or may not have, and to use that label to identify them rather than as human beings that they are, is what leads to violence and the passing of that violence through generations, which I know many of you are very well informed, but I feel is what we are reminding ourselves today of in this coffee with a purpose. And so I want to say that there are many members of our community who are now wading through a U.S. immigration system that is far, far more complex than the one my dad encountered so many years ago. One which one would have no hope of navigating without excellent legal counsel. And many people cannot afford that. Even if they can, it can take as early as a year, but more frequently up to 10 to 20 years to fully regularize an adjustment of status. And what happens in between? Well, people need to move on with their lives, and people need to be productive, and people have children, and they need to raise them. And so life continues. And the question is, what quality of life will Natick agree to provide as these people navigate that system? There are many, many more questions, I'm sure, that you all will have for me. And so, or both of us. But if there's anything particularly of a legal orientation, I can do my best to attempt that. But as Marge said, there are so many areas of expertise that it would be impossible to cover it all. But I wanted to say that the warning has been issued and the bell has been rung many times before. If we ourselves don't commit to that, no one else is going to. And we cannot rely on anyone in the future to do it for us. So the time we have is now to do what we need to do. And I will leave it there.
Well, thanks, Susan. Inspiring words. And of course, we heard from Marge some of the specifics of what you're hoping to do. I already see a question up at the at MetroWorks, but I want to just jump in with one of mine, and maybe this is old hat news to everybody, but could either one of you clarify or expand a little bit on the term undocumented, particularly as it relates to there being anything wrong? Because I think it's easy for people to think, oh, undocumented, they're not supposed to be here, they're not doing it right, as opposed to what you were just alluding to, that it takes many, many years to actually have all of the proper, so to speak, documents in place. And there's this huge hiatus where people need support. But if either one of you could kind of expand on that a bit, that might help.
Go, Susan. I have my own comments on that, but Susan's the legal eagle, so.
Okay. Okay. So crossing the border, right? First of all, so how can you become undocumented? Where is a border? A border is any point of entry into the United States. That could be by airplane, that could be by walking, that could be across a border, etc. Across a physical border, excuse me, like a land border. But there are points of entry throughout the United States. And there are ways to register in advance. There's an app if you did not come with a visa. And that app is kind of up and down in terms of how it functions. But people kind of are thinking about that walking across a border. But actually, many people who actually are quote unquote undocumented are actually in a situation where they had a visa, but that visa has expired and they have remained in the United States. That could be a tourist who has a valid visa, a student who had a student visa, or a individual with business who has overstayed. And in those cases, that in and of itself is not the end of the story for that particular individual. Simply being here in a process in which one had a visa but then overstayed, there are a variety of ways in which one can adjust their status from a status that is incorrect now into a category that they actually are eligible for, and they have to simply apply to get. So they are moving from that situation one into the next. Crossing the land border without a visa is a different charge. That is a charge that puts you in a defensive posture in which you have to explain or defend your reason for arriving in that way. And there are a number of acceptable reasons for doing that. And asylum is one of those very, very important acceptable reasons for doing that. Special considerations are also given for unaccompanied children. And in addition to that, there are ways to apply for waivers of inadmissibility where one has made an error of that kind, but then has another valid reason for remaining in the United States, such as being sponsored by a family member, including a spouse or an immediate family member. So simply entering or staying longer than you should puts you in an undocumented status, but that does not mean that you do not or should not be allowed to remain. And I think that's where there's a bit of confusion. I also wanted to say that there have also been challenges and mistakes sometimes made, or challenges in processing. So for example, There's supposed to be an accelerated visa process for Afghan refugees, an accelerated process for Ukrainian refugees. And unfortunately, the time has lapsed in some of those cases. And those folks who received paperwork, that has lapsed. And now they are out of status because the government has not processed their paperwork fast enough. So a lot of people, also, there are people who, through no fault of their own, find themselves in an unsure legal status. Other people have relied on their legal status and have been incidentally removed. For example, military veterans who served in the Iraq War, who were legal permanent residents who somehow faced deportation. And so there are cases where it's extremely important that we return our own, as it were, like those who have served. So there are so many pockets of areas that are sort of left for lawyers to do a tremendous amount of fixing or adjusting or trying to address. And I just want to mention that. And then Marge, I'll pass it over to you. Did you want to add to that? I mean, that is, by the way, an extremely overbroad and generalized answer to the question.
As we said at the outset, immigration is so complicated. My perception, so I think when a lot of people say the word undocumented, they're basically believe that these folks have no legal right to be here and no paperwork that says they should be here. And that is, first of all, after coming to the United States, you have a year to apply for asylum. And it takes, what is it, 6 months now to get a work permit, or at least 3, if not 6. So, which is a way of being documented because you get a work permit, Social Security. But the word undocumented is really kind of, it's something I think people use to talk about anybody whose immigration status might not be they're a US citizen. And as Susan said, that undocumented, that lack of documentation comes from a variety of places and in a variety of ways. And so, yeah, there you go.
This is a flow chart that Marge
I gave out
earlier presentation that might illustrate the complexity of the process.
Yeah.
Promise, I'm not going to let her go through it in detail,
No.
but to illustrate the point. Yeah.
It's fairly, yeah, it's kind of crazy. And some people who are totally legally here in the United States are still called undocumented because they don't have the United States documentation that we consider, I don't know, valid. They don't have a Social Security card. They weren't born here. So it's kind of to me, when somebody says undocumented, depending on who they are and how much I know them, and they're basically talking about anybody whose immigration status they don't understand.
But may I just also, I'm sorry, Marge, go ahead. You were just
and
gonna
as
say.
Susan said, that status can change basically daily, and also change based on the laws that get passed tomorrow or the next day. And one of the things we're trying to do in Natick is to make sure that anybody is welcome here, regardless of what we consider documents or undocumented. Go.
Both. So we have temporary, so a variety of different things. Temporary protected status in the United States, which means the president of the United States sees a situation, a humanitarian disaster, proclaims that anyone that's coming to the United States as a result of that humanitarian disaster is protected in the United States, provided that they connect with the government and let themselves be known and are present here. And therefore, we know that they're here, but they have to file that paperwork. But they have a very short window of time. And when the proclamation is made to when the time that's given, and people have to be informed and know, I could have done that particular thing. Let me give you an example of a personal complexity regarding that. I was forced to ask for that status because I was representing a child who arrived here in the United States at the age of 10. Her mom was from Haiti, and her mom tried to establish a life due to the instability in Haiti. She tried to establish a life in the Dominican Republic, which is part of the same physical island, but it's a different country. And after doing that effort for about a year or so, went to Brazil with her daughter, her father having died years earlier. She went to Brazil and tried to make a life there, and it just wasn't tenable. And they undertook a trek to the United States that had them crossing over at least 9 countries. One considers how one would get through Ecuador, Colombia, and through all of Central America before arriving in Mexico. And in the course of that journey, Mom slipped and fell in a river and drowned. So this 10-year-old child was taken by the other members of the group and was brought forward into through the rest of the journey, which we think was possibly somewhere in Central America all the way through to the United States. And during that time, she witnessed the rape of all of the adult women who were part of that group by marauders who are constantly preying on individuals. They didn't rape her because of how she responded. She responded so violently physically that they thought she had some kind of disease or illness. They left her alone. When she got here, she was very lucky that she had a family member living in Massachusetts, and there's a special treatment for children in particular who arrive at the border without an adult. And so she was put through that system, and she was able to be here. But because Mom died in the way that she did, I don't have any legal paperwork. I don't know what country that even occurred, how I could possibly register that anywhere in order to get her what we would call a special immigrant juvenile status, which would allow her to ultimately someday get a green card. And in the meantime, getting Dad's death certificate out of Haiti is also, if one is following the news about what's happening in Haiti, an incredibly difficult effort. And I've contacted a variety of different influential people to try to make that happen. In the meantime, the current president, seeing the situation in Haiti, announced a temporary protected status with the clock ticking, although unaccompanied minors, let me point out, always can apply for asylum. So that's an exception to the 1-year rule. And there are others as well. So you might miss the 1 year, but there are changes in circumstances and extraordinary circumstances that are 2 areas that permit you to still file for asylum even after a year has passed, and there are rules about that. But this child will always be ultimately able to, if we can get the paperwork. But in this particular case, the best that I could do was get temporary protected status for this particular case. And so Marge has shown that flow chart, and I just want to point out, even among that flow chart, at the upper left-hand corner was 1 year to do all that, but put two or three asterisks on there. There were 3 exceptions to that, even still. So it's something that is almost unnavigable for a lay person, especially someone who's not, English is not their first language, and maybe they're coming from a civil law jurisdiction and not a common law, let alone how we do things here in the US, being unique from region to region at times. So you really do need, a helping hand, like any NGO or services, or, they all have to be lawyers, of course, but anyone that can help you understand how to navigate that.
Thanks for that case study, man.
For clarifying, quote unquote.
Yeah. Someone at MetroWorks, either Martin or Pat, have their.
I think Pat had to leave, so I'm the only one here right now.
Oh, okay.
Anybody want to come down? I had a question way back toward the beginning of what Marge was on the initiative in the town of Natick. And I recall at least a year ago, Cody Jacobs was heading an initiative. I think it was to make Natick a sanctuary city. And my wife Bev, if she's still there, she knows more about it because she was involved. Is this what you're doing evolved from what Cody was doing, or is it something?
Yes, Cody is our head honcho. Yes, this has evolved from Cody's original intention was to do a sanctuary city, and then we've progressed along the way to where we are now. So yes, Cody is very involved. He's sort of the lead organizer.
Okay, good. Yeah, we got that momentum going.
Thanks for clarifying that. Let's see. Paul, you put your hand up. Got a question or a comment?
Good morning. I don't know if I identified myself earlier as a town employee, but I am a department head with veteran services for Natick and Dover. So I am a town employee, and I have met a couple of times. I'm glad you clarified that with Cody. I have met a couple of times with Cody, and I remember Cody originally talking about the sanctuary city or community, and I like what you two are proposing. All of you are proposing now as a welcoming community versus a sanctuary city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But Cody's a real go-getter, so
He's working hard. Yep.
keep him around.
Oh yeah, he's completely aware we're all working together, and we are just tag teaming on different venues as they come up. So
yep.
So hi Ricky, you've got your hand up. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I'm late. And I missed the beginning of your program. So could you give me in a sentence or two the thrust of your efforts? Because I went through your program, having been born in Vienna when Hitler came, and being being a refugee, and then being an enemy alien, and then being homeless, and then coming to America. And it took me 11 years to become only because I found one Jay Ball who was born in this country, and we got married. So that's how come I became a permanent resident. So needless to say, the issue is one that not only have I lived through, but I certainly understand some of the complexities, but I didn't get the thrust of what you're doing. So can you make it, short for me? And I apologize to the rest of you. I was up all night from 1 o'clock this morning, and I have not slept. I don't know what's wrong. We just came back from the Far East, and I'm totally
jet
lagged.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Anyhow, I didn't want to miss it. I've missed you guys for 3 weeks. So
So I can do that. Really
I think we both need to do the sentence, each of us, because each of us feels so strongly about that. May I actually, if you don't mind, Marge, start? Ricky, so this is how I would say it before the court. The matter before us today is whether we will remember the journey of Ricky Ball and those who have come before us, God willing, and what we can do with our own two hands today to make sure that that never happens again. That's in one sentence. That's precisely the work that is being done, and nothing more. Nothing less, and God willing, more. Because we haven't even touched on what we could actually be doing to truly welcome people and to not identify them, you have or have not. We don't want people carrying a star on their, ultimately, there are many ways to discuss this, but I stare at that star on our Real ID driver's license with tremendous reflection.
I didn't think about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
tremendous reflection, because that distinguishes those with papers to those who do not. And we all opted in to carry the yellow star, and I'm stunned, but let's move on from that. Go ahead, Marge.
So just so you know, I do not have a real ID. You don't have to get one. And one of the reasons I did it was in solidarity with our immigrant neighbors who now can get a driver's license. I think Susan said it really well. Basically, we're asking that immigration status not become another level in Natick of a way to get rid of people we don't want around, which is basically so that town employees can't ask someone's immigration status in order to use that against them. And I've known of that happening in 2 or 3 different places, and it does not end well for the immigrant. And I think that's basically the gist of it, is that we want to make sure that that doesn't become, so say you're arrested for a crime, we don't want the fact that your immigration status might be different than mine to become yet another level at which you can be rejected or gotten rid of.
But let me also.
So what is the concrete action you would like to see the town?
We have written an immigration welcoming policy that we would like the Board of Selectmen to enact, which would apply to all in-town employees. Meanwhile, the police department is working on their own policy that has a lot in common with ours, and we've been working really closely with them. But our hope is that the select board would enact a town policy that would cover all town employees, that would not allow them to ask for immigration status or work with ICE if ICE or any federal organization for that matter, if ICE comes to town and wants to arrest somebody or take somebody out of anywhere.
Yeah. And for the benefit of Ricky and the rest of the group, but Marge had mentioned that one of the things she sent to me was the draft policy, and I'll put that up on the shared drive and send people a link to it. So Ricky, you'll be able to see that. It's actually a good segue to the one other question I was going to ask, except that it's more, in a sense, a town question. So I don't know whether, Catherine, whether you're actually actively listening or not, or would care to respond to this, but as I understand it, so as you were saying, Marge, you folks are drafting a policy. You think the best course forward is it would be something that the select board would adopt. One of the reasons for having it written, I remember you saying that, should the names change, Chief Hicks is very supportive right now. Presumably some of the members on the select board are supportive, but if the names changed, the policy would be in place. I guess my question is, what does that actually mean to the town? Like, if all of a sudden someone comes in and says, I don't like that policy, I'm not going to pay any attention to it, what happens? And as I say, it's kind of more a question, unless you folks happen to know.
I think that there are 2 parts to the question, Doug. The first is preventative. This sets a tone. You made a perfect, your point is absolutely on the head. And if someone were to come to the town and say, I don't want to follow this, right? So first of all, we are asking people to reflect on how they comport themselves publicly in official capacity, to not ask the question, so are you really a US citizen or not? Like, what are you? And you'll notice our policy contains exceptions, because there are times when that question is absolutely valid. For example, voting, right? One must be a US citizen above the age of 18, et cetera, et cetera. There are multiple other elements. So clearly the policy takes that into consideration. So the policy is tone setting. This is how we conduct ourselves. So what we believe is that when individuals are then hired, they are handed as part of the package of hiring a set of the various policies that are codified here by the town, and that they say that they read and are informed of those policies, so that if someone were to then abuse that privilege, then there could be consequences as a result of not following policies that employees are asked to follow. So I hope I've summarized that. The idea being that, you know, the codification of it means it's something that we care enough about that we expect people will follow it in their conduct. Does that make, I don't know, does a select
Yes,
member
that certainly addresses the intent of it. And Catherine, I see you've come off mute, so
Yeah.
perhaps you want to.
So I think Susan said it really well in terms of, you know, it's important for tone setting here. You know, you're employed by the town. Here are our policies. It's important to note, though, that a select board policy cannot be used to discipline a police officer. So the police would have to have their own policy, and the collective bargaining agreements mean that, you know, basically set forth that a police officer must abide by the policies that are enacted and adopted by the police chief. So this policy, a select board policy, would be applicable to any town employee other than school employees. So it would be town administration, DPW, libraries, everybody but the police department and the fire department, actually.
And also, just to add to that, if we may, to update everyone here, we had that conversation, that this ongoing discussion with the police department, and we do anticipate that they will develop their own policy. Marge, if I'm speaking correctly on that. And actually the school is way ahead of us, way ahead of the rest of the town when it comes to, because they really are caring for the hundreds of immigrant families that are currently here in Natick. And I believe they're covering how many languages, Marge?
40 some.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that Catherine has received the latest news, but we just had this conversation last week with Chief Hicks, and Catherine had expressed the issue of the police not being a town policy being enforced on the police. And so we had a long conversation with Chief Hicks about two policies, and that's why we've come down with a town policy that would be approved by the select board. The police are working on their own, and we talked a lot about comparing the two and how they're related. And so I'm not sure Catherine has gotten that news yet, because that was fairly recent. But Chief Hicks, Cody just sent the newest policy to Chief Hicks, which was a result of our last conversation, making it a town policy rather than a police policy, and asking him for his response to that.
Thanks. In terms of the police, I had maybe kind of a detailed question. Marge, you were talking about, or you had on a slide having to do with ICE interaction in the town, and that essentially it couldn't occur without all the proper channels being covered. And then, but that second bullet point had been added, something in the effect of, unless in Chief Hicks, you know, judgment, it needed to be. And it's kind of a TV Law and Order question, like relating to warrants. Does that judgment have to happen before such action might occur, or as opposed to saying, okay, yeah, ICE came in and did all this, now I'll think about it afterwards. Yeah, they were okay.
So Chief Hicks had two concerns that we talked to him about. One was the situation that happened, I think was in Chelsea, where ICE just showed up and raided one of their factories there. And his concern was, if ICE decided to come
without notifying the police, by the way, that's what, without notifying
the police. And his concern was that if ICE decided to come to town and arrest somebody, he wanted to be there, not to help them, but to bear witness, first of all, you know, the neighbors, what's going on. Secondly, is this really something that they should be doing in what he considers his town, his law enforcement area? And so that was one of his concerns, and we changed our policy to address that. And then the other concern he had was if there was, we had originally stated that we didn't want ICE in the facilities, any facility, without a warrant, a signed warrant. And his concern with that was if they were having a multifaceted law enforcement, whatever, engagement, would he say to the FBI, oh, you can come in, but ICE, no, you can't. And that's why we put in the phrase that with his judgment, or the chief of police's judgment, if that was an important thing to be doing. What we don't want is, and he is totally on board with this, is ICE just walking into a facility and saying, oh, I want that person, I want that person. Or people being held because ICE says they want them without a warrant. If ICE has a warrant, ICE has a warrant. But sometimes, many times, they don't. And so we have talked to him extensively about his presence in both places. Does that answer your question, Doug, or did I just ramble?
I'm
No,
gonna,
I think that began to address it, but Susan, do you
Began
want
to address it, yeah.
I'm gonna add two pieces of Massachusetts. There's lots of little pieces of Massachusetts law that also intersect here. So I'm just gonna mention, there's another scenario that Chief Hicks is really concerned about. But before and that has to do with having the cooperation and collaboration with the immigrant community. So I'm just going to leave that to the side for a moment, because I'm just going to say one brief thing about this concept that Marge is referring to. Has to do with whether or not police officers can, Massachusetts under state law, whether they can detain a person even after a judge has decided or a jury has decided the status of an individual. Once their case is closed under Massachusetts law, the Massachusetts police have no power to hold a person after that decision has been rendered. What ICE had been doing in the past in different administrations was picking up the phone and saying, hey, do you mind hanging on to that person for a little while because we'd like to pick them up. And so the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Supreme Judicial Court of this Commonwealth, has decided that is not legal. We do not do the work of federal immigration officers. That's their job, and that's what separation of powers and the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution is all about, as well as the Massachusetts Constitution. So it's for that piece that Marge is referring to with the ICE detainer, that second example. The other example, the one that Police 6 is very concerned about, was codified by, was signed by Charlie Baker back in 2021 to implement by statute several federal laws that allow an immigrant to step forward and bear witness to any aspect of a crime. And there are several enumerated crimes. And that participation in our government process is what then gets certified, and that gives that individual who previously may not have had a status otherwise, or may have had access to other avenues to adjust status, to also obtain a status in the United States. And why that's important is because some people in a family-based process could be waiting for decades. But if they are the victim of a crime or witness to a crime, and they participate and otherwise have good moral character, then there's an avenue for them. And Charlie Baker's, the intent, I think it's like chapter 258F off the top of my head, 258F, yes. That codifies that into Massachusetts law, but it's already federal law as well. But it's a policy enforcing statute, because we want the police to feel encouraged to connect with the immigrant community, but we also want the immigrant community not to be afraid to report crimes when they are witnesses to them here in the town of Natick and anywhere else in the Commonwealth. So this policy would be the beginning starting point, and then we could then do outreach, because we could then reach the immigrant community and say, look, we have a welcoming policy. You know, we're not here to round people up and throw them into camps.
Thank you both for adding or clarifying on that. I guess I'm not seeing other hands up. I know one additional question I've got is just, um, I, how do you see the future of this? So it's not yet a policy. What are the next steps to get on a select board agenda? Has that already happened? You know, what's the path forward?
We sent our latest draft to the police. Again, totally separate from they're developing their own policy. And our hope is to hear from them fairly soon. And then we would like to go to the select board before the end of January if possible. But we haven't gotten on their agenda yet until we hear from the police department. Because we don't want to go forward until we're sure that they are okay. And we literally went line by line through the policy with Chief Hicks and Assistant Chief Lozon and wrote down all of their concerns, and then we sent them a policy updated. There were some things, you know, there are some things that we want to make sure get included, but they were very supportive. And so that's where we are right now. We're waiting to hear, we sent that out yesterday, I think, or the day before. We're waiting to hear from them. And then as soon as we hear from them, we'll say it's a go and get in touch with the select board and ask if we can get on their agenda.
And we've also offered to be of any help, if at all, with providing that memo that compares the different policies, because police chief has had the opportunity to review several iterations from different towns. And so sometimes when you have multiple drafts like that, you know, I kind of just want to roll up my sleeves and say, what can I do to help to like kind of get it all coherent? And so we've offered our assistance in helping accelerate that, as being able to have a policy in place would also help the police chief's goals or the department's goals in codifying their policies, which then would help them with future accreditation. I believe there's a question.
Yeah, Cindy has her hand up. Cindy, you want to come off mute? And
so I have two questions. I guess I'll ask the first one first. It's more straightforward. So I'm relatively new to Natick, and I see a lot of people who look like they weren't born here, that they've come from somewhere else. But I'm curious, and I don't even know the population of Natick or the number of households, but in Natick, do you all have a sense of how many immigrant people are living in Natick now? I'm just curious. And you said 40 languages, and I'm assuming that it's somewhere upwards of that many different countries that people are coming from.
At the very least, yes. Yeah. Well, I think I was an director of international programs at Boston College Law for almost a decade, and similarly at Tufts University. I would often be confounded by any assumptions I could possibly make about where someone came from based on what they appeared. I might just offer. Sure. But for example, a vivid example for me was a student who, my husband's family's Korean in part, and I can sometimes identify Korean last names. So I'm so confident that the person must be Korean. So I greet them as appropriately in Korean, and only to find out they are actually Korean immigrants having been born and lived in Brazil. And my face turned 20 different colors as I quickly switched over from 안녕하세요 to tudo bem com va? Because so I'm just sharing that as like the trials and tribulations of an administrator and professors. I have been definitely floored and humbled, I could say. But the second part is, one thing I want to leave you all with is that we are living with an invisible society around us. I guarantee you, I absolutely guarantee you that the things you cherish and hold so dear, attendance at a religious service, attendance at anything in the common that you might care about. Visiting any shop, I guarantee you there were people with a unclear status all around you at that moment. And they are incredibly vulnerable. They can't tell you. They tell me because they know that I'm an immigration lawyer. So sometimes I get pulled to the side at the cash register or somewhere and said, geez, I've been trying to do this for like 12 years now. We haven't heard anything back. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what I can tell you is that we live completely among and within each other. We're completely symbiotic. And we're stepping forward because we have the opportunity and ability to do so, but not everyone can. So it's much, so the numbers much bigger than you think is the short answer.
No, I just wanted to do you have a sense of how many people who live in Natick weren't born in Natick, however they got here? I'm just curious.
There might be some statistics, but it will never be a complete picture.
No, I totally get that. And I'm not talking about legal status or anything. I'm just curious because it seems like I know there was a period in the 20th century when there was very few immigrants, and then now there's more immigrants coming, and I think it's wonderful, but I just kind of want to have a sense. But if we don't know, we don't know.
You had a second question too, Cindy?
My second question is, so it seems, so this policy, I think it's wonderful that we're working on. It seems that one of the best things one can do to be welcoming of immigrants, whatever their status, is to have a policy that protects them legally. But given the name of the policy and the name of your committee, once we have a policy, it seems that the policy says we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. What kind of things can Natick do to be welcoming in a not legal sense, or is that part of your committee's eventual goals? Is my other question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is not in the wheelhouse of our committee. I am working with another group of people that is trying to establish an immigrant welcoming center in Natick, possibly right where you guys are right now at Paul's place. They're working on that's they had applied for a grant which they did not get, so they're finding other ways to go about that. But we're trying to pull together a immigrant welcoming center. Framingham has the Worker Center, but we'd like to establish something in Natick, and because Natick is on the bus line and the train line, it's a good place for that right downtown. So that's probably a multi-year process, but that is something that we're doing. We are providing housing. The Presbyterian Church is providing housing for the Haitian families that are coming here. And there's opportunities for individuals to do that if you're interested. And so that's pretty much what's happening right now, but it's not really within our, that's why part of why we changed to an immigration welcoming is we wanted to make sure that people didn't think that we were then going to offer sanctuary. So that's where we are right now. We're trying to do that. The classes at the library that are English language classes, although they're often full, right? Hard to get into, yeah. So teaching ELL at the library would be a really good way to help. So that's what's going on right now.
I would also just add just a quick thing to that is we Cindy, we had Marge and I, a bunch of us did a multicultural day this past summer, and we put out some question and answer and just kind of connecting with the community. And then we took out this big piece of paper and said, hey, what ideas does everyone else have of what they would like to see? And then we ended up with like, I don't know, 20, observations that people made of things that we could be doing in Natick. And we've saved that, with the hope that as things develop, that maybe we might be able to find a home for some of those great ideas. And that's why we'd love to hear from everyone. Like, we'd love like for everyone to come together and just sort of brainstorm out things they would personally see, because just the diversity of ideas was really not only inspiring, but it was also giving us a lot of thoughts about things we could really be doing. And that would be just fantastic if we could get that going, because that would be bringing that welcoming, that beloved community that MLK, is talking about, breathing life into that. Policy is the beginning, but why not have let's have bigger goals too. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, thank you.
I will say
And,
that a friend of mine who's she's from Belgium, but her parents are both from Congo. She came to the Dilwale Festival here in Natick, which I somehow missed. But anyway, so you're not just, when you have a festival which is completely welcoming, you're not just drawing on people from Natick. Brockton's pretty far away. Bridgewater, sorry, she lives in Bridgewater. Yeah.
Yes, that we are actually putting Natick a little bit on the map, because so much is going on that is so dynamic here. People are coming in, and I think that is so amazing that our town can host and be, so the word is passing around, that Natick is the place to be. And our cultural center has a role to play. Our trail conservation has a role to play. All of this, we're creating, it's an environment of humanity within an environment of nature. And if we could put that together, how dynamic and amazing would that be?
Susan, you're an inspiring speaker, and I want to recognize Ricky. She's patiently had her hand up. Ricky?
Thank you. I've been, I'm interested in knowing what was the spark for what you're doing. Was there an incident, or was there something that happened that made you, that got you on this road?
Cody got an idea.
What? Cody just had an idea? Would be
Cody
good.
had an idea, which, and he talked to Miriam, who we all know also from our church, who is also the director of Natick is United. And together they just decided that this was something that we would like to do. I don't think at that point there was anything, well, at that point, I think we still had the previous president, which might have been part of the
that could have been, because during that time period, I mentioned TPS. There's also CAM, DACA. Some of you might remember. Those were all getting put on hold, stopped, whether officially or unofficially. So like either, gee, how come I haven't seen an application in a million years? Okay, not to exaggerate. I haven't seen this go through. Why is this not going through? And also just outright statements like, oh, today I've decided I'm suspending this program, or I'm not doing anything further on this program. And that kind of volatility, it's a reminder, that we can't take any of that for granted. So what little control we might have is just how we can impact the space that with dignity we call our own, which is the town of Natick.
Yeah, I think the comments that you each just made kind of illustrate that this is not the one thing that you're doing. This is one of many things you're doing. There's a lot of very tactical, concrete ways to help in this area and to promote the idea that it's a welcoming community, and having a policy to state it formally is just another tool in the toolbox. We are just about at 10:30. Does anybody else have any closing comments or questions? Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering, Susan, if you are willing to share your contact information. I am aware of a family that might be able to benefit from talking with you.
Of course, of course. Doug, perhaps there's
Doug can put it in.
actually,
Yeah.
let me put it in the chat. I'm just going to put my personal email in the chat. Because I don't control what the firm takes on or doesn't take on, but I can absolutely communicate. That's
Great.
my direct email.
And is that okay to share with our full?
Oh, yes.
list, Susan?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I'll as a follow-up to this, I'll put the presentation, the draft policy, Susan's personal email. I think others had put a couple of links to things in the chat as well.
Yes, thank you for that. I was looking forward to reading this.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you both for coming. It's a good topic, I guess, to end our year with. So we will be taking a couple of weeks off so everyone can enjoy the various holidays that occur at the end of the year. And we will see you
Can I
again
just
in
one more thing?
January. Yes, Marge.
We'll
Sure.
keep Doug informed of our progress, and he can share that with you if you want him to. I will send the email, and also we do have a website that sort of explains everything. I'll send a link to that as well to Doug, and he can send that, and then that will also update where we are in the process, if that's something you would all like.
Yeah, I think that would be terrific to keep us informed. Great. Martin, you can probably turn off the recording at this point.